2017 was one of the best years in terms of video game releases in recent memory. Every single type of genre and player got its proper due. But in my personal opinion, the best part about it was the return and rise of some of the premier JRPG franchises onto the public eye. Not only that, but we also got other returning franchises that I thought were dead and never coming back, actually coming back. Companies trying and succeeding at creating new IPs, new good contenders to a genre that was mostly dominated by one single company. Hell, even a Sonic game that was actually good. Sure, it was with body fans, but who's counting? Point is, last year was amazing, and it actually was a year in which I played more games than ever. So many, in fact, that I could actually compile a list of which were my favorite ones that I played, which is the subject of today's video. So, without further ado, let's get into my top 5 games of 2017.
Number 5!
Let's just pause for a second to reflect on the fact that Persona, let alone Shin Megami Tensei, has become one of the premier RPG franchises that many people actually expect great things from. And that's in the span of just one console generation, mostly thanks to Persona 4 actually getting some mainstream attention. Now that the Persona 4 extended universe is behind us, we can finally get the next entry into the series, which is something I was expecting for a long time since, by the end of the whole P4 arc, I was ready to throw all that away. Because seriously, it fucking sucked. And yes, I'm looking at you, Puchis number 1 and number 2. Between that and the additional wait because the translation didn't get finished in time for a simultaneous release, I was kinda getting frustrated by Persona 5. But on April 4 last year, the endless wait finally ended with the official North American release of this game. And oh my god, it was too awesome! The story was refreshing in my opinion. Sure, it still had the same basis of high schoolers get supernatural powers and save the world, but the way it was told and the starting premise of the main character not being instantly loved by everyone made it interesting to me. I think the part that I love the most about both story and setting is the fact that they finally ditched the shadows from the previous two games and go back to actual demons from the Shin Megami Tensei series. Sure, the game may count them as shadows, but there is a clear difference between this and this. There is also the return to a more classic style of gameplay with some of the changes made to the battle system in general, from the re-addition of the nuclear, psi and gun elements to demon negotiations. Persona 5 feels like a good mix of both classic and modern games in the series. I also love that they give you incentives to actually get more ranks in your confidence, thanks to the added bonuses these give you when you get to a certain point in their storylines, with most of them being quite useful both outside and inside of battle. In general, the whole gameplay overhaul was a welcome addition while also keeping it just familiar enough to those who played previous modern entries into the series. As for the visuals, man, let me tell you, this game is a complete package. It just oozes style around every corner, character design, dungeons, streets of Tokyo, hell, even the menus are stylish and interesting to look at in every aspect. It also helps that Persona 5 takes some art style cues from Catherine, especially in the way they direct the in-engine cutscenes, which is a good thing since Catherine also was a visually interesting game in its own right. It also complements pretty well the anime art style that both games have, but without being too anime. And also the music, holy crap, the music! It fits so well and complements both the visual and even sometimes the gameplay aspects of the game. Top to bottom, it's filled with amazing tracks that fit every single moment, from the massive boss fights to the more moody times where you're just exploring Tokyo and socializing. Everything in this game works so well together into a single, very strong and very impressive experience. I could feel the love and effort that was put into this game, and the wait between its original announcement in 2013 and its eventual release was completely worth it from beginning to end. So, if I love Persona 5 so much, then why isn't it higher on this list, you might ask?
Well...
Atlus. You made some questionable decisions around this game, and they are big enough that they managed to bump down this game from an almost completely locked first place to 5. And these are my reasons why. First, the whole localization and voice acting thing. When I heard that the North American release was going to take some time because the translation wasn't complete yet, I kinda just took it as it is. After all, I'm also a fan of the Yakuza series, and those games take a long time to get into this side of the world. And even then, that's just translating text. But when the game finally arrived and as playtime went on, I started to note some things in both text and voice. Although I couldn't place the exact reasons as to why until I started to navigate through forums, social media, and commentary from other sources all around. That's when I noticed the translation had some problems. Nothing super serious, but reading through some text I started to notice some awkward lines. And I wasn't the only one. There's even a site that actually compiles some of these weird lines as well. And sure, one might say that doing something like that is being nitpicky, but if we take the precedent posed by previous entries and even some games from the same parent company, Yakuza comes to mind, it is kinda strange that some of these things slip through the translators. Okay, I'll preface this by saying that I am no voice actor and I have no form of acting training whatsoever. I'm just your average Juan Perez who can barely speak English well because it's not my primary language. So you can take my words with a grain of salt. But Takamaki? Sakamoto? What the fuck, man? With so many years of listening to more modern dubs, I thought we had the part of pronunciation on point. At least on the professional side. That kept bugging me to the point that sometimes I just stopped taking the game seriously. And again, I am no trained pro or anything. But fuck, man. Can I at least ask for a little bit of more quality on my English dubs since I'm never getting a Latin American one? But yeah, moving on to my next point. Sometime after Persona 5's release, we got the announcement that we are getting a new Persona 5 game, Dancing Star Night, alongside Dancing Your Best Friend's Grave Simulator, but that last one is beside the point. And also, the rumor mill running around is saying that Arc System Works may be working on a new Persona fighting game based on Persona 5, which sure might not end up being true, but got me thinking, what if we get another extended universe? I mean, getting new games with a cast that you love and want to play around with more sounds like an amazing thing. Except that I don't trust Atlus with doing that anymore. You see, I remember a time when I used to love the cast of Persona 4, how their characters grew and how they changed through the course of the game. And by the end, they were more mature characters overall. Then Persona 4 Arena happened and all went down the drain. What's that, Chie? Character development? Pfft, who needs that shit? We gotta make more steak jokes. God. Atlus, if you're going to do that, at least try not to ruin hundreds of hours of characterization just for the sake of wacky shenanigans. Please. Finally, perhaps the biggest gripe that I have against this game is the aggressive stance that Atlus took against streaming and recording footage in general. You see, before the game came out, Atlus sent a PR statement detailing that you could not record and post footage of the game and stream only up to a certain point. And while everyone and their mothers actually skipped these suggestions without a second thought, there is a certain subset of people who got the worst end of the deal out of this, which is people who wanted to capture gameplay but don't have a capture card or the means to getting them. Which is a camp that I'm actually in since at the moment I do not have a capture card and getting one requires a hefty amount of money. And with the option of capturing footage natively completely locked for PS4 players even to this day, that means that as much as I would love to give my thoughts on Persona 5, that's not gonna happen anytime soon. With that being said, let's move on to the next game, shall we?
Number 4!
I can't believe that I'm actually saying this. But Crash is back, baby! Yeah! When Activision Blizzard announced that they were doing a remaster of the first 3 Crash Bandicoot games, I was cautiously optimistic. After all, there was no way that they could do justice to the classics, right? Well, imagine my surprise when Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy came out and it was actually good. I could barely believe it, but I was glad. I have so many good memories associated with those games, and now I can relive them with a new shiny coat of graphics. Now, you may have noticed that there is a specific entry from that trilogy as this 4th spot. Well, here's why Cortex Strikes Back is that specific entry and how, in my opinion at least, it stacks against the other 2 games in this collection. First, since the presentation aspect of this game is kinda the same across the board due to all 3 remasters being on the same engine, I can't exactly compare them based on how different they are. Suffice it to say, they do look fantastic with the new set of graphics and color, giving a very vibrant look to the already colorful games. That being said, they do have different designs in terms of levels. For example, Crash 1 has mostly natural environments related to the native islands in which the game takes place, while becoming more and more industrialized the closer you get to Cortex Castle. Then there's Crash Bandicoot Warped, in which, since the main motif is time travel, you visit multiple locations from across time. From medieval towns to futuristic cities and highways on the 50s, it's all over the place. That being said, I honestly prefer the more subdued, for lack of a better term, levels in Cortex Strikes Back. Sure, they do have things in common with the other 2 games, but I feel the ones in Crash 1 are a little bit simplistic, and the ones in 3 are just too over the place. So, in my opinion, that's why Crash 2 is better in that regard. Next is the audio department, which I do feel kinda got screwed with the new instrumentation that they gave to the soundtracks. But that's besides the point. Really, this is more of a personal preference to me. The Crash 1 soundtrack is okay. Mostly complements its environments, but it's nothing to write home about really. While Warp's soundtrack is very solid top to bottom and has some bombastic tracks, but there are some not so good ones like the plane and motorcycle levels, and the new versions of those tracks are just not as good as the PS1 ones. As for the Crash 2 soundtrack, I really liked it overall. I mean, sure, it does not compare to the PS1 version, but it's still very good, with my personal favorite track of the game, the track for Pack Attack and Rocket, still being amazing even with the new instruments. Finally, there is the gameplay, which, to be fair, now it's all the same across the board, which means no more awful sluggish controls in Crash Bandicoot 1. Unfortunately, having the Crash 3 physics raises a different problem.
Crash 1's level design is awful.
And with the updated controls and way to crash, it gets worse and worse, especially in the bridge levels. That's where Crash 2 excels. Sure, the motorboard and jetpack are not that good either, but it's still pretty fun to go through and even 100% it. Something that I don't feel that compelled to do on Crash 3 or Crash 1. Overall, while I do still like the other 2 games, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back has the most things I like, something that I would have not said back in the day. This gives me hope for whatever the next Crash game will be, with the caveat that it has to be Vicarious Visions and Activision Blizzard doesn't show its hands on it. That being said, I don't fear that much for the next entry on this list, because I'm sure that it will get better and better. Wanna see what it is? Well, keep watching!
Number 3!
After what it was a fantastic expansion with Heavensward, Naoki Yoshida and his team finally brought us a continuation to this epic story in the form of its newest expansion, Stormblood. And oh man, what an expansion Stormblood has been! At the beginning of it, I really had lowered my expectations since 3.0 was such an amazing era for the game that I really didn't think it could be outdone. And while at the time of this recording, in terms of story that has been certainly true, for the most part, 4.0 has been a substantial upgrade to the game. First and foremost, I'm so glad they finally dropped support for the PlayStation 3 version. The benefits for leaving that last-gen console could be seen right away, from the increase in inventory spaces, to the more expansive areas, and even some of the performance updates to the game had made it so worth it. And speaking of expansive areas, the new zones in Stormblood blew my mind, from the size to the variety of them. My personal favorite being the Asim Steppe, this massive field with multiple ecosystems to it that just looks gorgeous. In general, the whole visual component of this expansion is just delightful. And while I'm currently playing it on a base PS4, I can already see the improvements made to this department thanks to the aforementioned dropping of PS3 support. As for the new music, I must say it's pretty good as well. Another fantastic job by Masayoshi Soken, the main composer of this game, which, by the way, I believe should get more recognition than he currently gets. His work up until this point has been nothing but surefire hits time and time again with each expansion, and Stormblood is no exception. Every single song in Stormblood ranges from good to fantastic, with my personal favorite being Beauty's Wicked Wilds, the theme that plays during the Lakshmi Primal fight, which actually sets pretty well with the tone of the fight and it's actually fun to listen to. And also there is the Empire version of the Alamigan hymn, which in general sounds pretty epic and it's just a fantastic composition. So much in fact that I find myself singing it at random during my daily activities, which is a testament of just how great it is in my opinion. Now, in terms of voice acting, the cast still does a fantastic job in bringing in the characters to life. Every single member of the returning cast I still love, while some of the new ones also do amazing performances. In general, it is still one of the strongest aspects of this game. Moving on to gameplay, I must say I welcome some of the changes made to the overall battle system that, while they came around at the very end of Heavensward, they certainly come to shine with the new set of skills that you get during the course of this expansion. Now, I can't exactly speak for every single class in the game since I only really play Dark Knight and Warrior, but most of the new skills for those two jobs are pretty good. Although, if I had to complain about something, I must say it feels like Dark Knight got the shaft this time around, since most of the abilities they lost were useful for the most part, and the new ones are fine, but they are nowhere near as good in a boss environment as some of the ones Warrior or even Paladin get. And sadly, as of this recording, since a Japanese group cleared the hardest fight currently in the game with a Dark Knight, there is not gonna be any significant changes to it anytime soon, and that personally pisses me off. Now, aside from that, another aspect of the gameplay that I liked was the new series of story and expert dungeons, at least the ones we got up to patch 4.1. They strike that balance of familiarity from the expert dungeons in Heavensward with sprinkles of new unique mechanics that make them interesting in their own way, like the second boss in Bardam's Metal, where instead of just another regular boss, you actually have to do a series of mechanics a la Simon Says, which is a very refreshing thing to do and very fun in my opinion. As for the primal fights, the ones that are on the game as of patch 4.1 are some of the most fun I've done in the game. Lakshmi's Vril management or Susano's lightning attacks keep you on your toes while you try to focus on the fight, which I feel is fun and rewarding once you get it down. In general, most of the gameplay revamps and changes were fine, and the content that has been added to this game has been a very welcome addition. So with that all said, why did this expansion not rank any higher if I had so many good things to say about it? Well, first, while it is new and pretty good content, it honestly feels a bit like business as usual. Which, sure, I put out as a positive earlier, although it is still not enough to trump other entries that are above in this list. Also, the core loop of the endgame has remained the same for a while. And sure, people like it, and I kinda liked it too, but there comes a point in which I just get burned out and I just don't want to do it anymore. In a year with many good games to play, I just can't sit around and grind tombstones forever. But aside from those complaints, I can say that this is an amazing beginning for the expansion. I can't wait to see what Yoshi P and his team do for future patches, and hopefully when I come back, I'll have an amazing game waiting for me.
Number 2. We are perpetually trapped in a never-ending spiral of life and death. Is this a curse? Or some kind of punishment? I often think about the god who blessed us with this cryptic puzzle, and wonder if we'll ever have the chance to kill him.
If you told me in 2016 Yoko Taro was going to come out with a new Nier game with the gameplay done by Platinum, the first thing I would have said to you is... who? It took me the better part of a year before I really had any interest in the game, but with people talking about previous entries and how most Yoko Taro's story is developed, I slowly but surely got around to get hyped for this game. Thanks in part to listening to people talk about other Yoko Taro works, and in part because unless it's a licensed property, you can't really go wrong with Platinum Games' style of character action. And sure enough, when the game finally fell on my hands, I was ready, excited, and pumped up to play the game and enjoy the story after I was caught up with the lore and what Yoko Taro stories are all about. But let me tell you, even knowing all of that beforehand, it was a wild trip. First, in terms of presentation, this game nails it down. Its post-apocalyptic landscapes are gorgeous, from the cities that have collapsed and been overtaken by wildlife, to the expansive deserts, the rivers, waterfalls, and even the abandoned factories. The locations are varied and amazing in their own right. As for the character designs themselves, well, what can I say except for this?
Oh my god! Size of that ass! Oh my god! Look at the look on McMahon!
I mean, is there anything more to say about the character designs in this game? Well, of course there is. Sure, the females are, for lack of a better word, horny as fuck. But honestly, all the characters from the androids to the different type of machines pop up and capture the imagination. In general, the presentation aspect of this game is just top notch. Everything looks just right, and the animations during combat also manage to look super fluid and crisp. Definitely one of the strongest visual styles of 2017. As for the audio, I must say this game has one of the most impeccable soundtracks I've heard this generation. Every single song fits perfectly in every single instance, and even if you listen to the songs without their proper context, I feel they still hold up amazingly. Also, I gotta give props to the fact that every single song has multiple versions and they still are just a delight to listen to. And if that's not enough, the voice acting in this game is as impressive as the soundtrack itself. Every single voice fits every character so well and they were on point. My personal favorite being Kira Buckland as 2B. I just loved every single voice line she had in the game, and it helped to set the mood in the multitude of instances of both regular gameplay and story cutscenes. Which actually leads me to just that, the story. And honestly, I gotta say, it was pretty dope. I really don't know where to begin. It was epic, it was crazy, it felt fresh, or at least as fresh as a Yoko Taro game can be, which is pretty fresh. I honestly could not do it any justice here, so all I can say is go play it. Now finally, the meat and potatoes, and the main reason I gravitated towards this game, the gameplay. I am a huge fan of the Platinum style of character action combat, but I recognize that sometimes they kinda go off the hard end with some of their games. But I was glad to see that Nier Automata, while having some of the elements that make Platinum games as good as they are, also has some elements of accessibility for those who, perhaps, haven't played anything remotely close to this, with a chip system that even allows you to enjoy combat without even pressing a button. And that's just a minor thing you can do with it. For example, by the time I hit the end of Route A, I had a chip setup that allowed me to pretty much be at top health all the time regardless of the situation, which adjusted to my playstyle of just going ham on the enemies and tank hits like a champ. As for the combat itself, I liked it. It definitely has the Platinum touch. It feels fast and loose while also being precise and meaty, with most of the weapons feeling pretty smooth to use and the dodging just feels right. In general, the combat is great, really. That being said, I do have some minor complaints about the game in general. First, while I do love the story and how it is delivered, I did kind of spoil myself on how Yoko Taro operates in terms of using quote-unquote endings. So by the time I got to the end of Route E, I already knew what to expect, so it did reduce a bit of the impact of it. Also, exploring the open world, while fun at first, became a bit of a chore after a while. The faster methods of traveling felt a bit too clunky in my opinion. It didn't ruin the overall experience, but there were some points in which I was getting tired of it. But yeah, aside from that, Nier Automata was a surprise hit for me. It had all the right elements that made it that much more awesome, and it had all the qualities of an instant classic. I'm sure I'm not the only one who feels this way. I just hope that the next game in the series, either being a direct sequel or an unrelated entry, ends up being as fantastic as this one was. So, if this game was so good, what could possibly top it? Well, you're about to find out as we go into my favorite game of 2017. This is...
Number 1!
Feel the Force indeed. The Yakuza series is one of those examples of long-running franchises that have everything to be great but had terrible or no marketing. And what little there is always amounts to either, isn't Yakuza that Japanese GTA ripoff? Or, oh yeah, the game with Mark Hamill in it. Seriously, it took me years to even know that this series existed back on the PS3 generation. Very few people talked about it. And despite the fact that it has been successful kinda like Monster Hunter in Japan, it has remained niche in this side of the world. But finally, in 2017, the series got its due thanks to the release of its two 10th anniversary entries, Yakuza 0 and Yakuza Kiwami. Now, Yakuza 0 is a fantastic game and the second best entry point in the series in my opinion, the first one being Yakuza 4's theater mode. But Kiwami actually addresses some of the issues I had with 0, which is why this is the game that made it into my top. So, let me tell you why this is my game of the year. First, the story. Yakuza Kiwami is a retelling of the original PS2 Yakuza, with, as far as I know, some new cutscenes, which I can't really distinguish which ones were in which version since I really never played the original. But still, the story feels pretty cohesive and most of the character motivations made sense to me. Granted, I also had the benefit of having played Yakuza 0 before Kiwami and from 4 onwards, so I did come knowing what to expect in terms of tone and storytelling, but it still managed to capture and surprise me at every single turn. I also love the way that the story and side quests are separated, with the main story being a serious drama for the most part, reminiscent of more traditional stories, while the majority of sub-stories in the game are more classic JRPG shenanigans. And while that may seem like a tonal dissonance, I feel like these two different types of stories actually help each other, since there are some very rough moments throughout the main plot that I certainly needed to cool down from. That's where the side stories came in, and when I was getting tired of the wackiness, I went back to the main plot. Honestly, I highly encourage you to go out of your way to try this game. And yes, I am saying this based on the story alone. I am not one to keep silent about spoilers since that has been the way I've gotten into multiple franchises, but I'll make an exception with Yakuza Kiwami. I'll just say that this is an amazing story and has to be seen to be believed. Now, if the story is just that strong to support this game alone, how about the other aspects that conform this game? Well, turns out they're pretty fucking strong. Starting with its presentation. Although I can't exactly speak for the PS2 ones, from the PS3 onwards every single Yakuza game has been a feast to the eyes. The models look amazing, the animations are top notch, and feel like they have weight and impact to them. And the FMVs, oh my god, the FMVs, they are just top of the line. Hell, I can even see the pores on Kiryu's skin on every single major FMV. Yakuza Kiwami and the Yakuza franchise in general has always managed to deliver the promise of having quote-unquote realistic graphics, but without using a color palette limited to greys, greens, and the occasional brown. Every single thing in this game looks vibrant and very true to life, even when you walk down the streets of Kamurocho and you see NPCs just doing random stuff. The whole game feels alive. The only other game I feel even comes close to this in terms of its visual presentation is Persona 5, which is a testament of just how visually impressive is Yakuza Kiwami. It has that stylish crazy factor while also being grounded in reality. And speaking of stylish, the music in this game contributes to the overall style and presentation of the game. It has a very good variety of genres that range from adrenaline pumping techno to jazz, or even some of the music that you can hear in the background of stores and buildings. There is a certain nighttime vibe that surrounds the soundtrack that helps to bring the game alive. As for the voice acting, while I cannot speak Japanese at all, I can tell that the performances are pretty top-notch and fit for every single character. For example, Kiryu, being the stoic badass that he is, has a very deep voice that commands respect. Majima has a crazy tone about him, but when it's serious business time, he certainly steps it up and sounds menacing. Or Nishiki, who has a more regular voice, but when he breaks down after all the stuff that happens to him in the story, he really conveys his frustration, and when he goes full evil, he really sounds like a bastard. Point is, the voice acting and really the sound design in general is on point. Finally, the aspect that ties this game together, the gameplay. In case you've never played a Yakuza game before, let me explain how things go. Yakuza games in general are JRPGs in the sense that you gain experience points to increase your stats and have random encounters for the most part, but with the twist that those random encounters are conducted via beat-em-up style combat. And man, the combat is very good. It's simplistic enough that you can, for the most part, just mash your way to victory, but you can also execute a variety of combos and actions on your opponents. All of this with an amazing coat of stylish action that, in my opinion, never gets old. The controls in general are tight and pretty responsive. Every single action flows almost naturally with every button press. Although it may take you a while to get used to how the animations work in combat, and the targeting system is wonky as fuck, but controlling Kiryu still feels correct overall. As for the open world, which granted it's just restricted to Kamurocho this time around, it's just the best. Having played multiple iterations of it, while it may be a little samey, it still has that sense of familiarity to it, almost like you're coming back to the neighborhood where you grow up and knew like the back of your hand. There is just so much stuff to do. You can get lost in the many side activities that you can indulge in. From karaoke to bowling and even the sub-stories, time just flies with this game, which is something I personally enjoy. Losing myself for hours on end just admiring the sights, eating on restaurants or any of the other activities. Couple the gameplay with all the other aspects that I mentioned before and you have a winning combination of awesomeness. And sure, Yakuza 0 has all of that as well, but there are some aspects of the game that I really didn't like that much and got fixed in Kiwami. Like how the increasing of stats was tied to money, which, while cool on paper and appropriate in context, it feels like it adds some padding to the experience because of how expensive some of the endgame abilities are, and grinding them was a chore to me by the end. Which, sure, it can be the same with regular XP, but I don't have to grind a billion of that XP just to get one level on Kiwami at least. Also, the Majima Everywhere system is a better way to implement random boss fights in the map than the Mr. Shakedowns in Zero, and it has more variety. In Yakuza 0, once you fought a Mr. Shakedown, you fought them all, since all of them share the same moveset, and they also take your experience away until you beat them. Which led me to some very frustrating moments when I suddenly lost all my money and the only way I could level was with vast amounts of it. With Majima, at least you don't lose your XP if you lose to him. He has 3 completely different movesets, and even when you reach the point where you have seen all of his tricks, it's still fun to watch the ways he ropes you into fighting him. Also, as you keep fighting him more and more, you get to learn more about him as a character and his motivations, which I felt was a fantastic way to build to his character. In general, I felt that the stuff Zero did fantastically, Kiwami did it better. Although that doesn't take away from the fact that Yakuza 0 is a strong contender for Game of the Year. But then again, like the rest of this list, it ultimately falls down to personal preference. In conclusion, Yakuza Kiwami is the total package. Like Lex Luger but better. And also not a wrestler, but that's besides the point. I love this game to bits, and I would seriously recommend for you to go out of your way and play it. Yakuza Kiwami is worth both the time and money. It's just that good. And for those reasons and way more, This is why Yakuza Kiwami is my personal favorite game of 2017.
咲かせてみせよ泥水育ちのエジ桜
So there you have it, my personal favorite games of 2017. And you may have noticed that there is a recurring theme throughout this list. Yes, I do like RPGs and Japanese games, a lot. And while I didn't try to put Japanese games on this list on purpose, last year turned out to be the return to prominence of many of the Japanese developers that kinda got the shaft during the previous generation of consoles in favor of your more standard American brown and grey shooter. And don't get me wrong, those are fine too, but not my personal cup of tea. Anyways, what were your personal favorite games of 2017? I am kinda curious to know, and maybe it will also help to broaden my horizons a bit. So leave them in the comments below and I'll try to check them out and also maybe give my thoughts on them in the future. In the meantime though, I think it's time to take up my hunting equipment again and take on some massive beasts, since I feel it's about time I take a look at one of the biggest releases of 2018, Monster Hunter World. But that is a video for another day. For now, just keep doing the stuff you do and be nice. I am Hazard Kujacker and I'll catch you later. Hey, if you liked what you saw, check out my other videos, subscribe and tell a friend. That way you can help this channel grow.